What's good, everybody? Welcome to One Foot Down, a college fantasy football podcast. I am your host, Chris Battistel. With me is my co-host, Mike Haase. It is week 14, championship weekend, and we both wore black for your opponents' funerals. Mike, let's get it popping.
Welcome, football fanatics, to the One Foot Down podcast of the Fantasy and Frames Network. Your gridiron guides, Chris and Mike, are geared up to lead you through the thrilling world of college fantasy football. Whether we're diving into Power 5 giants or uncovering hidden gems, brace yourselves for expert insights, analysis, and daring predictions. Stay in the game. Subscribe, rate, and review. This is your 2024 source for college fantasy football dominance. Let the fantasy frenzy begin.
It is week 14 for the college fantasy football players. It is the championship week. You're going to start your studs. You're going to get strapped in for one of the most nerve-wracking weeks of your college fantasy football life. Mike, was the finals very good to you? How was your semifinals week, brother?
So 3-2. I was in. So it was 8. I think we both started with about 8. Let me get it right. 8 playoffs each, somewhere around there. We both were pretty happy being in when you're in 10 or 12 leagues and you make 8 playoff.
Yeah.
We were both good. And I think we got cut down to 5-4, 5-5 each. Mm-hmm. Now I'm cut down to 3, which I have to be happy with 3 in the final. I would think with the 5, it's because I was, it's the way it goes. So and funny enough, the 2 best ball are the ones I didn't get. I got the 3 lineup ones, which we'll discuss tonight, which is more rewarding in a way.
But yeah, in the finals again in the Legacy League 1 last year, you took down Winning Edge. He was undefeated throughout the season. Took him down in the semis. This year, took down Jared Palmgren from Chasing the Natty. He was first all year. He had a great season. And then you took him down on your way to your second finals in that one. I had a heartbreaking loss in one of the leagues we're in, Mike. I had that undefeated team, undefeated since like week 6 of last year, won the championship last year, tried to run the table again this year, but I traded away the win. I got too trigger happy trying to accumulate CFF assets. And if I didn't make that last trade, I probably would have been in the finals, but that's how she goes. On other side of that, I got Josh Jacobs, who for NFL purposes has been absolute stellar. So can't complain too much with that, Michael.
Well, yeah, I mean, we're being it's the last show and we didn't contact one another wearing black. I kind of thought I kind of thought one of us would be wearing green.
Yeah.
I don't know. I didn't send that in the show notes that I thought you'd be. I thought you'd show up in like a Joe Montana jersey or Tim Brown. Or
I was gonna show up in a Harold Fannin jersey just to bring good juju for the finals because he got hurt. He hurt his shoulder and he left last game. He's a true game time decision for this Friday. So we are really hoping that Harold Fannin is good to go. So. He is the key to a lot of people's championships this year. A cheat code at the tight end position, Mike.
Oh, yeah. Definitely. And the other injury, well, I don't think he's that injured, but scary was Shadur. We've talked about him all year.
Yeah, big hit.
He got taken out. I watched I'm thinking, like, that's a career shot right there. That close.
Yeah. It was a lot of good football again played on the weekend. Some upsets, some big upsets as we saw Kansas versus Colorado there. So Ohio State bringing down Indiana, not really much of an upset, but still a lot of good football this past weekend. And we're heading into a lot more. We're going to kind of do the same thing that we did last week, give you a bunch of plays at the position because you are starting your studs. You're starting the guys that brought you there. I mean, if you look at Bryson Daly did last week, some guys were hesitant to plug him in versus ND, but he was who he was all year. He got the 2 rushing touchdowns, and he was pretty much all of that Army offense. So he gave you what you want. Mike, before we get into the Week 14 plays, let's head to the chat. We got Jamie M from Out of Rhythm Fantasy. Make sure you go follow Out of Rhythm Fantasy. The perfect season is gone. 11-1. No.
In the center.
It hurts. The worst time to lose, too. Jamie Perot, what's up, guys? What's up, Jamie? Thanks for tuning in. Jamie M, what is this nonsense? I think he's talking about the Harold Fannin injury that we were talking about earlier. Heartbreaking stuff. And Tulane. Yeah, Tulane on a bye last week, but ready to go this week. You're firing up your Mekhi Hughes shares. Right?
Yeah.
Right. All right, Mike. Let's get into the Week 14 plays. Quarterbacks we'll start with. We got 2 big ones. Our quarterbacks last week put up some big numbers. Braylon Braxton and Fernando Mendoza performed really well for us last week in the semis. So if you were a guy that like we mentioned, that maybe had Dampier or Josh Hoover or one of these guys that were on bye, those 2 fill-ins produced for you and produced well. So you started those guys. Hopefully you're going on to the finals. This week, though, we got 2 potential studs lined up for you for championship week. I went first last week. Mike, you can take the honors this week, brother. Who you got as your Week 14 QB play?
Jalen Daniels. So do we have the right guy there on the screen?
Yeah, I believe so.
Oh, that's good. Yeah. Well, there he is on the right. I'm looking. Nice black uniform to throw me off. Triple black knight, not white. What do you call it? Not a whiteout, a blackout. But this player we've had for a couple of years and talk. We all know he's talented, and we all know he's had injury troubles, right? But they're hot. So how I chose. So my theme this week again is the same thing. On how it can work if you're watching the players that have risen to the top the last few weeks. So there's a number of them. So we're hoping they stay hot, hoping my picks stay hot and the team. That may not always be how you want to pick them in fantasy. We want to just go after these points and stats, yes. But to back up the play and back up the momentum. Some of them are carrying the momentum and some of the older players. But I thought I'll take him. They're on a 3-game streak. And beating ranked teams, and they need to win to get bowl eligible and probably get into a decent bowl game. So I think he'd like to do that. It's nice to see him. He's running the ball finally at a little more of a clip than he was earlier in the year. He's around 20 points a game, average wise, but a couple boom games lately with like 39 and 36 points. Lately. So it's just ride that hot hand while he's there. And if you have him, and I mean, I have him on a couple teams, and I don't even know if I started him yet because you have a deep enough bench, but now's the time. If you have a couple guys hurt, to do that. He's 22% started, but 70% owned. So that tells us, a lot of us just kind of sat on him and now he's hot. He's carried the ball 88 times for 410 yards, 6 touchdowns. I mean, we know he's even capable of more, but let's plug him in now for this week. The game is at 61.5 over under.
You like that.
So,
you'll take those points.
And I was like, so I tried to pick, just they think the points are coming in this game. He runs it for almost 5-yard average for each carry. So I think, playing Baylor, I think there'll be points in the game. Last week's game was a lower scoring game. The weeks previously, Baylor games were pretty high actually, and they were scoring a lot. So I'm just hoping for that rebound, hoping that they stay hot and his numbers keep going up. And I think you can plug him in that third spot. It's risky if you only got the 2 starting league a little bit, but yet not that risky at the 20 points and above. If you're anything below that, that's at least my threshold. We've talked before. We at least need him north of 20. Any QB you're starting, or it's gonna roast you in the end.
Yep. Yeah, I like the call. He performed well against Colorado, struggled a bit against BYU, but I think that you knew that was coming with that BYU defense, and then some good games before that. So I love the call, Jalen Daniels in the matchup this week against Baylor. Jamie says, Chris, you and I, my last chance for gold. We got a finals matchup in the league that we're in together. I told them I was coming for them, and I'm going to finish the job this week. He says, possible Old Dominion QB killing it.
Ooh.
Find a G5 team with high upside, I think, to maximize your points. Absolutely. We'll try to pinpoint maybe some of those under the radar teams like Old Dominion. He's talking about Colton Joseph from Old Dominion, who's been putting up some fantasy points. Absolutely. That's why you guys got to follow out of Rhythm Fantasy, man. They know what they're talking about. Jamie and Eli over there, two solid dudes. So Jalen Daniels is our one QB play. The other one, Cedric Bailey from North Carolina State, since taking over, has been the bright spot and a projected CFF stud for the next few seasons. He did struggle in some matchups, but over the last 5 games, he has improved on his season average. So he went from 17.76 fantasy points on the year. Over the last 5 games, he's improved that to 23.18 fantasy points, almost a 5.5 point fantasy point difference. So we're seeing the improvement in CJ Bailey's game, which is what you want. He's meeting the thresholds in the passing game while adding with his feet. So for quarterback purposes, for fantasy production, when you can find a quarterback that's doing both, not just dominating with his feet, but dominating with his feet, or at least including his feet into his game with his arm, you're just looking at potential fantasy points. And the matchup that he's got this week is a great one versus UNC. He's got 7.2 true carries per game over the last 5. If you want to look at how he started over the year, he's 5.2 over the first 5 weeks. He's got 3 rushing touchdowns in his last outing. That's not sustainable, but it's showing you that the ability for CJ Bailey to rush the ball into the end zone is there. He's got 5 rushing touchdowns on the season. In the month of November, NC State has been great in the red zone, converting 90% of their 15 trips. The Wolfpack hold a 60.7% touchdown percentage since CJ Bailey was QB. With Grayson McCall under center, that number sat around 50%. So Cedric Bailey is putting the ball in the end zone, and fantasy managers love that kind of stuff. As I mentioned, he's got the UNC Tar Heels this week, the 97th ranked defense in passing yards allowed against on the season, allowing 245.9 passing yards against every game on the year. Quarterbacks that played a full game against UNC, because there has been a couple rooms where they have split the load because they've been bad. But quarterbacks that have played a full game against UNC are averaging 28.37 fantasy points per game, and that is calculated from 6 total quarterbacks. Now, you might look at UNC's defense and think, man, there's that 3-game span that maybe led to some deception and having you a little gun shy in putting CJ Bailey into your lineup. But those 3 games were Wake Forest, where they played 2 quarterbacks, Virginia played 2 quarterbacks, and Florida State played 2 quarterbacks. 25% of the 6 matchups where a single QB played the full game had a QB1 finish, 2 in the top 5. 50% of those 6 games had QB2 or better finishes. The QBs that didn't have good days of those 6, Max Brosmer from Minnesota, Malik Murphy from Duke, and Grayson James this past week from Boston College. But Grayson James, Mike, had a decent day. He put up just over 20 fantasy points. So not a total bad outing, but the fact that Grayson James just doesn't use his feet and Cedric Bailey has that ability If he can have the day that Grayson James had through the air, he can absolutely put up 25 to 28 fantasy points this week versus UNC. The over-under for this game is 55.5 points. So they are expecting some points to be scored in the North Carolina versus North Carolina State game, Michael.
Yeah, like there should be points. I'm hoping there's points in that game when I have Hampton.
It's a big one.
Yeah, like North Carolina games sometimes can go way north in the points, and then the odd time it's throwing like right out of left field where they don't get the points they need. But losing their QB this year, Criswell, I think he's younger and not got the experience and leaning on that run. So I think good pick because the other guy going in, right? Like it's just you never know. But they're leaning on the run, and when the run isn't working, they're having a bit of problems.
Yep, I agree. So we are starting Jalen Daniels, and we are starting CJ Cedric Bailey from NC State in Kansas this championship week 14. Mike, let's move to the running backs. Who do you got from UAB, big guy?
Someone else on the bench most of the time for the year. That I've had, and I got Don Beebe. No, it's not Don Beebe, but I mean, I just thought of that. But whatever. It's who did Don Beebe play slot for, Chris?
Oh, the Saskatchewan Roughriders.
No. Now, actually, I'm probably going to get it wrong. Did he not play for the Bills?
Oh,
what if he did? Don't even Google that. Well, you know what? Maybe I am a little bit your senior. Like that. Let's not use the word just a little bit, Krista. Just a little bit. Donnie B. Anyway, so Lee. His name is Lee Beebe. Now, but some of these guys that I feel you've had on your bench, you've drafted them, picked them up for a reason for the year. When you start seeing, they might not be that starter you're hoping when you're in contention in some of the leagues, but it's time then, if you have to use them in those flex. So I wrote down, go ahead and do it. He's been really hot lately. Playing Charlotte should be a decent matchup. So it's a favorable matchup. He's ranked right around 60 right now. 60. He's 45% owned, 20% started, but he's been a little bit on a roll lately. For the year, he has 147 carries for 803 yards, 6 touchdowns, 5.5 average per rush. But again, 2 of these last 3 games, he's been running north of 100 yards. He's got 3 TDs. He's getting the ball. He's getting his touches, 15 touches. So I'm just looking for guys like that. Like I said, that I want to put in my flex. You got those 3-4 spots. I find myself using a lot of running backs that are hot right now because the wide receiver position can get tough if you start 3 in most of your games. So if you can find those guys that are catching the ball, he also catches the ball at maybe not as much as some other backs, but for 200 yards so far this year, 7.7 average. So he'll get a few per game, help boost you a little bit there. But the reason I make this play is I think this game's also going to be high scoring. It's 57.5 opening up as well for over under. He's being used quite a bit. I know they have a bit of a platoon, but not horribly. I think he's starting to get the lion's share. That's why I'm saying put him in now. It's the last kick at the can. And he's doing well. And Jacob Zeno, I think, has a bit of an injury. I'm not sure how serious, but I don't know if he's in total jeopardy of sitting or not, but maybe enough where he's playing, but his yards might go. So I kind of factored in. I just was thinking of a few things that, he's a good runner of the ball too, but for a QB. But I think maybe some of his yards go to those guys. I don't see why he can't pull out 125 and score and whatever. Keep those bottom flex guys getting solid points. They're showing us for these last few weeks they can do it. That's what will allow you to win your ship. The flex guys that bottom out and that haven't been getting the carries when we're doing our little research here, you want to avoid. You want the guys that are 15 plus. We like 20, but it seems to be in college, absolutely. The 20 touches are, we start doing this. to provide information. It's not as easy to find all these guys that are getting to 20. So you lower the threshold a little bit and plug them in. So I'm hoping, these different guys that have been 3-4 TDs the last couple weeks just keep you consistent enough in these flex spots to keep you rolling and have you win.
Yeah.
That's my,
I mean, look at Ollie Gordon being a league winner all of a sudden, eh?
He'll come back. Yeah,
what a week for Ollie Gordon.
Don't even talk about that.
Devin Neal just being an absolute boss.
Yeah,
absolutely love to see it. If you're lucky enough to have Ollie Gordon in the semis and you're in the semis and you played him, and you are pretty happy with that one. So
not on all my teams that didn't make it. I have them on 3 teams with
teams that don't make it. That's the problem.
3 with Ollie. I didn't make it.
We finally got the Ollie Gordon that we wanted. But it's in the semis, so
and I'm relying on these waiver guys. So what is it? Or not waiver guys, but guys on your deep bench, guys on your bench. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. Well, we're starting Lee Beebe this week, and Mike, I got a potential league winner that is probably unowned in your leagues because he's only rostered in 14% of Fantrax leagues since taking over the lead role for the Buffaloes week 6 versus Toledo. This guy has averaged more fantasy points than Woody Marks, Kyle Monungai, Darius Taylor, Jordan James, and Phil Maffa, to name a few. He's the RB22 in fantasy points per game and the RB19 in total fantasy points since taking over. He's averaging 22.6 carries per game, and he is mildly involved in the passing game as well. 17 targets. You'll take that with the workload out of his backfield. He had that one reception this past weekend against Eastern Michigan where he broke it off for 75 yards and a touchdown. Over the last 2 games, 53 touches, 326 all-purpose yards, and 4 touchdowns, where he is the RB11, averaging just over 28 fantasy points per game. He is 5th in the MAC in rushing yards with 774, tied for 4th in rushing touchdowns with 7. Al-Jay Henderson has rushed for at least 80 yards in 6 straight games. And yes, you heard it right at the top of this profile. He is only rostered in 14% of Fantrax leagues, Mike.
Did you just name all? It was 3 minutes to introduce this guy. That's impressive stuff. Before we even got his name,
had to build him up.
I mean,
Jamie's got a good one too. CJ Campbell from FAU has been an absolute stud for producing fantasy points, but Al-Jay Henderson has been just as good.
Yeah,
just as good.
A lot of our leagues that we're in, Chris, some of the same leagues that we're in, when we have limits on how many you can pick up.
Yeah,
I mean, I'm in there typing away. No more pickups. No more pickups. I go.
It's tough, but
it's tough, but it's fair.
You gotta hold on to at least one heading into championship a week because of guys like Al-Jay Henderson just sitting there. Mike, 14% rostered, and this guy is top 5 in rushing yards, top 4 in touchdowns in the MAC. And he's been producing fantasy points at a great clip over his last 5 games. And this week, who does he get? He gets Kent State, baby.
I was going to say, tomorrow night.
He gets Kent State, the league's worst run defense for championship week.
They're only 0-11 or something.
271 yards against. Rush yards, those are not passing numbers. 271 rush yards against per game, 285 rush yards against per game on the road. Where's Kent State playing?
Man,
Buffalo.
And how many teams is he playing for in the fantasy finals?
Yeah. Oh, right now he's only rostered in 14% of leagues.
Wow.
Kent State is giving up over a half a fantasy point per rush against per game. The red zone defense is bad, giving up a score on 93% of opponents' drives. That's great news for running backs. Lead running backs are averaging 23.09 fantasy points per game against Kent State. Buffalo are 22-point favorites. So the potential game script also works in LJ Henderson's favor in this matchup. So you are absolutely picking this fella up and plugging him in to your lineup this week, Michael.
Yeah,
if he's available.
Wish I could.
We got a question in the chat, Mike. Justin Nottingham. Thanks for tuning in, Justin. What do you think of Mario Anderson's matchup versus Tulane this week, Mike?
Yeah, it might be Tulane. Is Tulane's defense still up there pretty good? Like they're kind of in the mix in the middle. Like it's funny when you say in the middle of the pack, you look up all the stats when there's 150 teams. I mean, middle of the pack can sometimes be, kind of tough. And then some of the statistics, they may allow a lot of yards, but not allow a lot of points. So you have different stats that you're looking for, like for Navy, for example, like a team that you wouldn't want to start too many guys running against Navy, but yet their stats they may give up some yards and never allow. But against Tulane, I think Tulane's fairly decent there. I'm not sure if you could find.
They allow 114 rush yards against per outing.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. So if you
over the last 3, that number's at 107. So it's not a bad matchup, but
might not be.
He should get a good share of what Memphis wants to do on the ground. And I don't see it being a game where Tulane's going to run away with it. And Mario Anderson is game scripted out of it. Now, Tulane's a good team. Tulane's just to Memphis. But I still think Mario Anderson has a decent game and he's involved in Memphis's workload. So I'm plugging him in.
Yeah, I do think they'll run a lot. I have Seth Hennigan. I would know my stats. I only play him every other week type thing. Seth's a great quarterback, but his numbers fluctuate too much for me. I get kind of tired of watching that. But so I want the consistency because he's good QB, but yet some of the games they'll run and they'll just have all rushing touchdowns. So that's their focus on that offense. If they're going to get the points, it's probably from rushing. Yeah.
And he's involved in the pass game as well. If you look at his last 5 games, 7 targets, 3 targets, 9 targets, 2 targets, 5 targets. So you kind of want that production out of the backfield when he's also rushing the ball. Last 5 games, 22 attempts, 32 attempts. That one game versus UTSA, he only had the 12 attempts. But then against Rice, 25 attempts, and then UAB, their last matchup, 22 attempts. So I think you're safe. I think you're safe plugging them in. He's got a touchdown in every one of those 5 games, and he had 4 against North Texas. So we're keeping Mario Anderson in against Tulane. The matchup isn't the greatest, but the game script could favor what Mario Anderson's going to do and what Memphis wants to do. So we are starting Lee Beebe, and we are playing LJ Henderson from Buffalo. So make sure you're plugging these 2 fellas into your lineup. Mike, let's pivot to the wide receivers. We got a Duke wide receiver, and we got a Tulsa wide receiver. I'll let you lead with the Blue Devil.
Yeah, we're going over to Duke, because of the Riley Leonard not because of the Riley Leonard connection. I wouldn't do that to you, Chris, on the final show, right? But the little asterisks I have here in my research is you could go with 2 guys. So this is the catch of the show. I think you can go with Jordan Moore or Eli Pancol. They're both kind of I had a difficult decision on a few other guys I liked, but again, I'm focusing on players that maybe you started a few weeks, maybe you're waiting to see how they do. Consistency, but both these guys are consistent. They're the only 2 catching most of the passes in that offense. Moore is 45 catches for 700 yards, 6 touchdowns. He averages a nice hefty 15.6, and he's usually getting 8 targets or so a game. So I'd like a few more completed to get him to the 100-yard mark. And he's also scored, again, my theme of the week, scoring 3 out of 4 weeks or whatever is what I'm after.
Yep.
Last week, Eli Pankow happened to steal all the touchdowns for three in that game, but normally they're divided up a little bit more. And Eli has, their numbers are almost exactly the same: 51 catches, 721 yards, a few more touchdowns because of that week, right? So I'm just hitting. I kind of like that offensive. If there's 2 guys, it's just roll them out there in the flex spot. Duke's favored by 4 points in the ball game. The over/under is not quite as high as some of my other picks, but 53.5.
I'll take that.
So I'm just like trying to pick some of these games that you think you're playing Wake Forest, and Wake Forest hasn't really, run around trying to find the right matchup to do so. But I do like Jordan there. I think the running back also. So my other theme of the week is not that I'm focusing on any injuries, but some of the players that are getting carries and passes. The other Moore on the team, a little banged up. So just sometimes you want to find, I wonder who they'll focus on in their offense to free up more touches. Focus on a few of those guys. Maybe Eli doesn't get 3. Maybe they each get 1. One gets 2. One gets 1. I think either one is interchangeable in your flex spot after I did my full research on it. But kind of a sneaky offense. Just wish Duke. So you're hoping the 1 week they have a boom, right? And it's now. Yeah. So if they need to win to also get a bowl game, do it now. They both and both nice receivers to have those numbers, 50 and 750. But it's just, I know we want the pie in the sky, but all those guys aren't available right now, is who we're talking about, except for your last running back you picked that really put the numbers on, but not a lot of those guys that are out there to get. So we're just trying to fill in some consistent players here. And Wake Forest allows about 282 a game in the air. If they allow 300 this week, and these 2 guys, they're probably dividing that up, because that's the guys. So that's where I kind of focused on trying to find the right matchup for the guys that are going to get the looks.
Yep. Agreed. And that's what you want. That's what you want. Week 14 is you want the guys that have the most potential to put up fantasy points, and Jordan Moore could be that for Duke. Justin Nottingham. Speaking of Buffalo, wide receiver JJ Jenkins is hot going into that Kent State game. He absolutely is. Touchdowns in the last 3 games. 120 yards his last outing against Eastern Michigan, 131 against Ball State. He's been the go-to for Buffalo in that wide receiver room. I like the call, Justin. I like the call for JJ Jenkins. He's only rostered in 2%. 2% of fantasy league. So given the fact that Kent State game has the potential for big points, JJ Jenkins along with L.J. Henderson could be 2 potential guys that you could have on your roster that could put up potentially 20 or more fantasy points. Great call, Justin.
Another guy too, as you're saying that, because I love that. Another guy, like, where did Gill come from is it Syracuse? Yeah. Like, I
think because Pena got hurt, right? Pena was.
So see, this is what happens, because don't they have Meeks as well?
They got Meeks there.
Yeah, and Gatson. Gil. So anyway, I'm looking at the screen. I'm going Gill, and next thing you know, the guy's catching 25-yard passes from our boy
Joyce. And you're gonna go at him, and he's gonna get nothing.
Nothing. He's not. I bet she's rostered in 0. So I mean,
I bet you're right.
Yep, those games happen, but college is funny that way. We said at the start, he very well now could be unreal for the a bowl game in the last game. He could be great. So
absolutely. All right, so we are starting Jordan Moore from Duke this week at the wide receiver position. We are also starting this player. I show you up by showing up. We thought that Tulsa King was going to be Camden Benjamin, but as of late, it's been Joseph Williams. Over the past 3 games, William has led Tulsa in targets, reception yardage, touchdowns, and the so important statistic, fantasy points. 80 points over the last 3 games, where he's averaging 26.9 fantasy points. That's good enough for the wide receiver 5 in fantasy points per game through that span. Another criminally underrated potential league winner, rostered in 12% of fantasy leagues. Great matchup against Florida Atlantic, who are known to give up fantasy points to opposing receivers. We saw that just this past week with Charlotte 49ers wide receiver Omega Blake putting up 41 fantasy points in a 200-plus yard, 3-touchdown game. Week 12, Dante Wright from Temple put up 148 yards. And then just before that, Anthony Wright from ECU had another big game against his Florida Atlantic defense. Game in and game out, wide receivers have been putting up numbies against the Owls. And this week should be no different, because Tulsa is just as bad defensively as the Florida Atlantic Owls are. So there's a potential for this game to be a big shootout. Joseph Williams is a player that you're going to want on your roster if you play any kind of C2C, any kind of CFF dynasty. He's under-rostered, underrated, and he has been the guy for Tulsa over the past few weeks. He should be on your roster. So we are playing Jordan Moore, and we are playing Joseph Williams. Jamie in the chat says, Joseph Williams. Well. I missed my opportunity to play him this weekend, pick him up and sat him on my bench. The good thing about that is you get to see that he does it again another week. It's not just a flash in the pan. It's not just a couple, an enigma game here where he put up big numbers and then disappears for the rest of the year. No, Joseph Williams has been consistent over the last few weeks. So, Mike, let's just do a quick recap of the players that we are playing before we head into our last position, the tight ends. At quarterback, we're playing CJ Cedric Bailey from NC State and Jalen Daniels from Kansas. At running back, Al-Jay Henderson from Buffalo and Lee, not Don Beebe from UAB. Wide receiver, the Tulsa King, Joseph Williams, and the Duke Blue Devil, Jordan Moore. Our last position of play, the tight end. We got some burners for you on this week's edition of Week 14 plays at tight end. This is One Foot Down, a college fantasy football podcast. We hope you enjoyed the year of content, or the season of content, that we've given you so far. We've had a ton of fun making it. We are not done, Mike. We got one last position to go. So share with us your
special teams
and play.
No,
special teams. Kickers.
It's kickers. We haven't been playing them all year, Chris.
Chittendale from UNLV is an absolute boss man.
Nice. I don't think I'm getting any points. Playing him. Well, you never know in college. You never know. They'll find a way, Chris. They'll find a way.
So all right, who you got for us, big guy?
Well, we feel like we've talked about him a lot throughout the year, but his numbers, like his totals, I'm going to give you two different pictures from Jalen Conyers. And Texas Tech has been a funny team. Two different pictures of Texas Tech. Just a real, we know they have a lot of offensive stars, and he came over there. Yeah. And a little inconsistent at the start, so they didn't have a great start, but they're kind of coming into their own with points, performing to get a lot of points, and their fantasy guys are doing quite well. They divided the pie up a little bit too much, but they're scoring a lot. They allow a lot. This game coming up at 64.5 as an over-under. So I've been trying to find the over-unders and players that are hot. They're playing West Virginia this week, and Jalen is coming off of two in the last games. He's been playing 7 for 74 last week against Oklahoma State, and the week before, 2 touchdowns against Colorado, 50 yards. I know I don't feel totally like, that it's a given that he's going to get 75 yards and whatever. But I think just momentum on how I pick. I'm trying to give you picks where, yes, some of the numbers are holding true for some of these players. We expected more. Last year, he had some more trickery plays and things like that. So he was running the ball a little bit more too. We were hoping that this would happen this year, but with Brooks there and other guys there, he doesn't have to do that. But at the start of the year, that would have been nice. So now down the last week, 10.8 average per catch, 5 touchdowns on the year. I wish his yardage was higher. But again, he's a player that's hot right now. And with that high over-under, I have a hard time believing he's not going to be one of them, getting one of them. Brooks might get 3, but if the game ends up that high scoring, I think they have Kelly there too. But we'll see. So that 260.7 yards a game West Virginia allows through the air as well. So kind of up there. If this game ends up high scoring, you got Green on the other side and them on this side. So I'm trying to pick some of those players. You know, it's tough at the tight end position. Guys outside top 25, these falls out of that category. And just hope you plug him in. So I have him a team with Taj and him. Mm-hmm. So my theme is just finding, you know, like I said, it's not easy to find those tight ends that can guarantee probably to get in the end zone. And I'm going to say he's getting in for a 3rd week in a row.
Oh, look at that.
I just feel it. Feel it.
Shot. Babe Ruth and
feel it.
Love it.
Feel it. Get me into the double digits when I'm going up against Ty Warren, who's getting 49. Unreal, right? Him, who's running the ball too.
Yeah.
But that's what Conyers thought. Like they thought that at the start, you know. So, but hey, you never know. It could be the game where they, you know, he has the capability of doing that, those different type of plays. They just didn't use him like that. The way he was being used last year was interesting.
Yep. But, yeah. Justin Nottingham says, just pick Conyers up this week myself. Going to play him this week. Glad to see we're thinking the same thing. Here you go. There you go. So my tight end play is if your league holds the dual designation, or if this player is designated as a tight end in your league, you are playing Nicholas Harbor. Nicholas Harbor has finally been the player that we were hoping for at the beginning of the year. The lead wide receiver for the Gamecocks over the last 3 games in targets and touchdowns. If you play, like I mentioned, with the dual designation, you're going to want to put Nicholas Harbor in because he plays out wide 85% of his snaps. So if you can get a tight end that's lined up as a primary wide receiver for most of his snaps, that is what you want. Before these first 3 games, he was averaging 4.4 fantasy points per outing. Over these last 3, he's averaging 10.6 fantasy points. He plays Clemson this week, who isn't a great matchup overall, but a game where both teams are going to be able to put up points. We saw what Clemson can do offensively. We've seen over the last few weeks, especially what South Carolina can do offensively, putting up some big points. And the hope here is that South Carolina becomes a pass funnel offense and their funneled passes go to Nicholas Harbor. Clemson allows 222 passing yards against per game, so their defense isn't unstoppable. Their pass rush isn't the greatest either. Outside of TJ Parker, who has 10 sacks, no one else even comes close. I think the next closest guy has 3. With his current role and what he can do on the field, Harbor is a sneaky start if you're looking for someone who could possibly boom at the position in championship week. So, I mean, most likely you're not starting Nick Harbor if you lose Harold Fannin. You don't have a decent backup. If the guy that got you the championship weekend just not cutting it, and you have you're facing a juggernaut team in first place, you know, it doesn't do you any good to carry a tight end that's going to get you 8 points. You kind of want to chase some double-digit output from these guys. And Jalen Conyers, Nick Harbor could potentially give that to you this week. So Our starts for week 14 at the tight end position, Jalen Conyers and Nick Harbor from South Carolina, Mike.
Like it. I don't know if I have Nick on a couple teams, I think. I'm trying to think. Probably the same teams I have Ollie Gordon. Teams that didn't make it.
Yeah, so just a quick recap again. Quarterback plays, CJ Bailey, Jalen Daniels. Running back, LJ Henderson, Lee Beebe. Wide receiver, Joseph Williams, Jordan Moore. And tight end, Nick Harbor and Jalen Conyers. Mike, this is it, brother. This is the last show of the season for One Foot Down. I just want to thank you for joining me this season, Mike. It's been an absolute pleasure covering the game of college fantasy football with you this year. I've had an absolute blast trying to find some of these diamonds in the rough. We talked about it before the show. I think our record this year was pretty good. So give yourself a good old Dan Horowitz and pat yourself on the back, big guy.
Can only do it, Chris. You're the operations consultant. You're the statistician extraordinaire, the producer, the GM. Well, I'm trying to think off the top of my head what more titles can we give you? But yeah, it's been great. We've had a few, off and on when one person has not felt well, this and that, and we've made it a go. We've had great guests too.
Yep.
So that's been people supporting a couple, which has been great, and that's a lot of fun when you see that. So I mean, I just can't believe you have 14 weeks done. Oh my god,
14 weeks. I mean, the college fantasy football season is sadly over.
It goes.
After this week, the job is not done though, Mike. Make sure you're attentive to your lineups. Make sure you're paying attention to the news so you can find out if there is any late minute scratches or players that you might want to plug in, especially Harold Fannin. If Harold Fannin is on your lineup, you have to make sure you are paying attention to whether or not he's going to be dressed in his game. Jamie says, I'll get you guys on our show for the off season. You'll see these guys. Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead, Mike.
The other one this week too, we thought, I don't think Shadur's hurt too much, but I wonder about Ewers too.
Yeah.
Ewers,
Ewers, I think they said was good to go. He just a slight minor ankle injury.
So I mean, just if you have other options that you think, and number one tip that you always give, if you have a rushing QB that can run for 75, 80 yards, and you have Quinn Ewers, or you have following a few of those injuries, it might help you win the championship. If you have a guy that you're thinking, Daniels or whatever, you may not feel comfortable thinking it's not even a hunch, but if you have that guy that can use his legs and is scoring once a game, I wouldn't be afraid to put him in over just the passers that aren't running the ball.
There's one QB I'm confident in starting on a weekly basis, and his name is John Mateer. Outside of John Mateer, every other quarterback gives me acid reflux.
Him, but did you? Funny as you said though, I think I'm getting starting Dampier in one and sitting Dampier in one, and I don't know what to do. And then I looked at some of his numbers are gaudy.
Dampier. Yeah, Dampier's another one, man. I think he's the two guys that I'm comfortable at the position starting. More outside of that, it's just all right. Cam Ward can give us a donut, even though he's been pretty stellar on the year. Bryson Daly, is going to put up points because he rushes the ball a million times a game. But for me, it's John Mateer and everybody else, man.
Just doing both.
And he's the cover athlete. That's why I made him the cover athlete for the championship episode.
Well, you called it.
You pretty much probably drafted him for free. I remember you were questioning me when we were dropping the rankings episodes. I remember that, Mike.
We don't want to look at the championships I'm in at who my quarterback is that I picked up in these leagues. His name might be Mateer. So you see,
I mean, you pretty much got him for free. You drafted him or picked him up off waivers. You got him for free.
You need to listen to your co-host That's the whole theme of the whole year. You need to understand and listen to your host.
Yeah. Just like Shedeur Sanders should have listened to you.
Oh, well, yeah. If you know, yeah. But he's
just not
he did what we
he outperformed
it is
my
funny when
expectations
and when
like massively.
I can remember a comment I made way back, not that like week 2 or whatever, when we had the show. Now, what was the percentage we thought he could grow into spread it all to all? Well, he ended up doing that. He wasn't just focused in on one. It was he's using everyone. Who's we said even Shepard, all of them. Horn got hurt, but Hunter, there was really no favorite. And then Wester, I was worried early, but then now, so he's convinced. Well, you spread that ball around to those 5 different guys in the running back, Augustave, they got, or Augustev or whatever. They're using everybody. And that's what
Miller's going to be a stud.
That's what we want.
They just got Juju Lewis.
Right.
So,
which I would never use him if he was going to focus on, I'm going to use a number 1 target and I'm going to just become a funnel to the particular guy you want to funnel.
Spreading the ball around well. QB 12 in fantasy points per game. So take that. You take that with Shedeur Sanders.
And Riley Leonard, who I don't have anywhere. That's painful.
Riley Leonard, QB 15 in fantasy points per game. And you were high on Riley Leonard when we did that episode in January there, going over the transfers. But he was one of your go-tos.
But we thought more pass. We both thought, or not just us in the college football community, thought he could go there and rejuvenate some passing offense that Notre Dame typically balances it out. It's not
13 rushing TDs. For
Riley Leonard and Jeremiah Love may take them. I'll just hold my thoughts there. May take them to where they need to go.
Don't jinx it, Mike.
I don't know how you cover those two.
Bite your tongue. Bite your tongue.
Isn't it something? And then if they have Mitch Evans for the low crosser first down guy, oh my God, they might not need anything else. I just said it.
Mike's looking like Stan's dad. All right, Justin. It's been fun, guys. Enjoyed it. Justin, we appreciate you tuning in and commenting in the chat. Your support is greatly appreciated, man. Everyone that's jumped in, their support appreciated. Daly has been consistent. Yeah, he has. QB2 fantasy points per game, 34.77 fantasy points. Mike, that's it, man. That's the show. Thank you to Fantasy and Frames for giving us the opportunity to make college fantasy content. We appreciate giving the outlet to do it, giving the opportunity to do it, a full season, and we are looking forward to season 2, Mike.
And
you ready?
This weekend, look forward to Friday. Friday is Saturday. Look at the slate of games. Friday is Saturday. We get 2 Saturdays in college football.
I'm excited. Can't wait. Can't wait.
Yeah.
For Mike at FF Mike H, I'm Chris Battistel. We'll see you next time. Toodles.